Have you ever listened to some native speakers and just thought, wow, that sounds so weird. The words they're using don't seem right. I can't understand what they're saying at all. Well, don't worry. This is exactly what the course is for, to build your overall fluency in the English language and, of course, in English speaking. Now, today we're going to concentrate on three really important but quite confusing parts of speech. So there's definitely areas of the English language and English speaking that can be quite confusing. It can sound very strange. So we're going to be focusing on slang, idioms, and contractions. Having an understanding of these three things will help you improve your overall fluency, but by being able to use them at the right time and accurately, you're also going to quickly supercharge your English speaking fluency too. So let's begin. First up, we'll take a look at idioms. So idioms, or idiomatic language, are used a lot by English speakers to share meanings in surprising ways. Of course, idioms are used in many different languages. Now, you heard me mention idioms in one of the earlier lessons of this module, and it's something that I'm going to be talking about a lot throughout this course. So what I want you to do is try and guess the true meaning of the following phrases. It might be very different to the vocabulary used. Let's begin. So what might this strange idiom mean? Hang in there. Well, in fact, it means nothing to do with hanging from something. It just means don't give up. So this is an example of an idiom, a phrase that looks very different to its true meaning. Face the music. What might this mean? One of my favorite idioms, and in fact, it just means to deal with a difficult situation. And just one more example, the top banana, very British sounding in its use and nothing to do with fruit. It just means the very best of something. So here are three examples just to give you more of an idea about what idioms are. Basically, idioms have hidden messages, hidden meanings that are very different to the vocabulary used. So we're going to be looking at idioms a lot throughout this course, and I'm going to be teaching you a lot of useful idioms that I also use. But there's a few things to remember when it comes to using idiomatic language. First up, I would say only use common idioms. Now, I see a lot of students use pretty strange idiomatic expressions. And I also see a lot of teachers who teach their students idioms that, in all honesty, just aren't commonly used. Now, as a non-native English speaker, if you are using idioms that aren't really used, it's going to make your conversation sound less fluent and sound less natural. So I'm only going to be giving you idioms that I think are cool and I think that are used often. Here's an example. Well, does an eagle eat flies? Now, the idiom in blue here, does an eagle eat flies, is actually one of my favorite idioms. I read it in a book years ago, I think in some kind of dictionary. I've never heard it used, and the only reason I use it is so that people say to me, David, what are you talking about? What do you mean? So that's a classic example of an idiom that nobody knows the meaning of that sounds really strange. I use it actually just for a bit of fun, but I would suggest only using common idioms. Don't try and use idioms that are a little bit more rare or less used. Another thing is to try and apply the idiom to your own experiences. Of course, you need to learn the meanings. The vocabulary is very different, so you must find the meanings. Once you have the meaning of an idiom, then apply it to your own experiences. Ask, how could I apply this to my experiences? I think it's time I come clean. The idiom here, I come clean, to come clean, is nothing to do with showering or washing. It actually just means to confess, to admit something. Is there a time that maybe you could have admitted something? So if you just learned this, when could I use this? Ask yourself that question. And finally, don't overuse idioms in speech. From teaching lots of English students as well as more academic tests such as IELTS, I have seen students force idioms into their speech, use them too often, and the language can sometimes sound like poetry or something very creative, but in all honesty, not natural. So try not to overuse them. Only try and use them when it seems like the right time. Okay, I'm sure you're asking, well, can you teach us some more idioms? And yes, I can. I'm going to tell you my 5 top idioms that I use a lot. But also please do remember throughout the whole course we're going to be learning lots of idiomatic expressions as well as grammar rules and everything else as part of English language. So let's begin. Let's get you going with 5 top idioms. Remember, if you are just learning these now, how could you apply them to your experiences? Could you practice could you pause the video and practice using them? Up first, time flies when you're having fun. I hear this used a lot by native English speakers, and it basically means that feeling of time passing very quickly because you're enjoying yourself. This holiday went so quickly. Time flies when you're having fun. So this is more like a statement, something you would just say on its own. Cheap as chips, a very British idiom. I'll say it again, I'll be teaching you more British focused language because I'm British. Cheap as chips, actually not too far from what it looks like, although generally no chips involved. And it just means that something is very cheap and usually very good value. The dentist was as cheap as chips. I got a great deal. Chicken out, or in the past tense, chickened out. A great phrase used to describe when you were a bit scared, you didn't participate in an activity. Maybe it was too much of a challenge, you got nervous and said, no thank you, I'm not doing it. We went to a bungee jump, but I really chickened out. Okay, number 4, under the weather. Now, this definitely isn't in regards to rain. It quite simply means describing yourself or another person feeling unwell or sick. It's annoying, but I'm feeling under the weather. Maybe it's a cold. And my final top idiom is cut corners. This basically means completing a task without full care, completing a task by maybe making shortcuts, not giving your full attention, maybe so that you can complete this thing a little bit quicker. It's important not to cut corners in studies or you'll struggle to improve. Great advice. Okay, so that's it just for an introduction, these sort of basics, mastering the basics of idioms. In terms of your understanding of idioms, I'd just like to say now, if you have any questions, write them down or go straight to the Q&A section and ask any questions there. However, we are now on to another interesting, very native part of English speech, and that is contractions. Again, something we're going to talk about a lot in order to really boost your English fluency. So contractions are used by English speakers mostly to speed up their communication and generally make sounding words and sounding different sounds easier. The swimming pool is freezing today. We contract pool is into pools. The swimming pool's freezing today. So you can see that we've lost the I and added this symbol on top, which is called an apostrophe. Really important in writing, slightly more advanced grammar or intermediate at least. So pool is, the verb to be, pool is, pools. The swimming pool's freezing today. It's much easier to say without moving your mouth around, pool is freezing. It's just more difficult, takes more energy to say this. Here's another example. This book is not very interesting. It almost sounds too formal, too forced. This book isn't very interesting. Much easier to say and also quicker. My friend does not like football. My friend doesn't like football. So does not becomes doesn't. Again, just quicker to say, easier to say it, less effort in terms of positioning your mouth. Again, this is a really native technique in terms of English speech contractions. We'll be learning lots of them throughout the course, but it's good that you have an understanding right now in terms of just an introductory understanding of what they are. Okay, finally, I just want to introduce you to and talk about the basics of slang, which is something a little bit tricky in terms of understanding it all. So slang is very informal language, and it's used in certain areas of countries by different groups of people. So it may be that in North America, the slang is very different to South America or even Central America. The slang used on the East and West Coast of America could also be very different, which makes things complicated, because even though we're learning lots of English language, it may be that when you actually speak to somebody from a certain part of the world, they use slang that is very regional, that is very specific to where they come from. So we're going to be learning some slang through the course, but it's important you understand that slang is very dependent on where a person is from, as well as their class, which is to do with social and economical background. But not too much on that. We don't need to worry about that for now. Okay, so if we consider language by politeness, so imagine this is the line of politeness. Down here we have informal language. Informal language means less polite, more relaxed. In the middle, we've got sort of that halfway of normal speech, not impolite, not too forced and polite. And right at the top, we have very formal language. This might be the language used by the Queen of England. So probably something we don't use as much. Informal is relaxed situations with close friends, close members of your family, and it can at times use lots of slang, lots of idioms, lots of contractions. Generally normal language, so it's not too impolite or too relaxed, General conversations, it might be with someone you don't know very well, a general conversation at a shop, for example, and we'll of course be learning lots of this. People you know but not overly friendly with. And of course, formal situations. So it could be professional. It could be something at work, some training you're giving, speaking to a teacher, speeches at a wedding, for example. That generally is a bit more formal. And interviews, of course, is more formal language. We would not use slang really in interview situations. We use less contractions, less idioms. We try to sound a little bit more polite, a little bit more academic. But it's worth me saying that in general, we use probably more normal to informal language. This might make up 80-90% of general everyday English language. So of course we'll focus on this. However, throughout the course, we will be getting parts of formal language too in order to build your complete language skills. Okay, so that is the end of this part of the lesson where we've sort of gone through our understanding of idioms, contractions and slang. And it's now time that we move into our animated part of the lesson.